Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Sachs, ELNET Southeast Regional Director, and I'd like to welcome you to ELNET's Monday briefing. We have a distinguished guest with us today, Lord Walney, and a very interesting subject. His recently published report illustrating the abuse of the British charitable system by elements associated with the Iranian regime to spread Khomeiniist ideology, indoctrinate British Muslims, and undermine Western democracies. But before I turn it over to Lord Walney for this discussion, I'd like to briefly describe 5 macro trends that we are watching that we believe have far-reaching implications, good and bad, for the Europe-Israel relationship. First is the deepening and expanding influence of the Red-Green Alliance, which we have spoken about a number of times on this briefing. There is a direct correlation between the influence of this alliance and anti-Israel and anti-Semitic beliefs and activities. Second, which is a function of the first, the body politic of many Western democracies holds an increasingly negative view towards Israel. This includes the United States, where 84% of Democrats and 57% of Republicans under the age of 50 hold negative views on Israel. This was also on display in the UK as the anti-Semitic Greens Party came out as a winner from last week's local elections. Third, the US-EU/NATO relationship is being stretched to its limits. Fourth, Russian aggression is motivating Central and Eastern European countries to take self-defense seriously, forcing them to invest enormously in their defensive and offensive capabilities. Finally, number 5, Israel is increasingly becoming important to Europe as a hub for trade and energy. All this is to say that ELNET's 6 regional offices, who work in nearly 36 countries, are assessing the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and threats that these trends pose to the Europe-Israel relationship, and then identifying ways within our 3 pillars, diplomacy, defense and security, and economic cooperation, where ELNET can produce meaningful strategic outcomes. We couldn't and we can't do all of this without your support. So I want to say thank you to all of you who invest in our work. If you want to learn more, do more, or contribute more, please visit our website, elnetus.org. Now, let's turn to our guest, Lord Walney. Everyone can read his full bio on the invitation, so I'll just say that Lord Walney is principled, learned, and deeply experienced in British politics and national security. He's also a longtime friend to ELNET and to the Jewish community. So, Lord Walney, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Mark, thank you so much. I liked you before that very kind introduction, and even more so now. And thank you to you personally, and to ELNET as an organisation for the work that you are doing. It's vitally important, and the 5 steps, the 5 points that you set out at this introduction are enormously important in each of us understanding why the UK-Israel, the West relationship is so important, why Israel remains such a fundamentally important part of the Western alliance, which we must do. We must do what we can to uphold for the security of Israelis, but also for our own security here in the West. So
I think we're in this together, aren't we, as a Western society? And much of it hinges on how we address a number of the problems I just laid out. I would love to ask you, why this report and why now? Let's start with sort of a simple question, and we'll get into a little bit more of the complexities. But why this report and why now?
Well, in the work that I do in Parliament, looking at the relationships in the Middle East, and in particular on the way that the Iranian state threatens the UK's interests, and the different ways in which you do that, it does that. It's long been apparent to many of us that there have been a number of organisations within the charitable system that are not what they seem, that have some kind of alliance with the or affinity to the Iranian regime. But as the relations with the country have worsened, and as it has become, I think, clearer to a larger number of people, the essentially malign influence of Iran, which has been it has been absolutely clear and in plain sight for many years, and ELNET has been amongst those leading the calls for people to recognise that. But as it has become, as that has become, as that has become clearer, it's there's been an increased focus on, what are the different ways in which the Iranian regime operates. And there is a relatively large amount of focus on the violent threat which is posed by the Islamic Republican Guard Corps and the ways in which that is operating on UK soil. There is, I think, a strong belief that many of the horrific attacks that are being targeted on British Jews, on Iranian dissidents, on Jewish institutions in recent months that have been a part of elevating this sense of crisis in the Jewish community in the UK. The hand of the IRGC has been in many of them, either directly or as seems to be a key way of operating by funding other groups to do this. Now, and so there has been an increased focus on that, but myself and others of us within the British Parliament have wanted to make clear that that violent threat is only the apex of a much wider and pretty systematic strategy in Iran of being able to promote its influence and to recruit in other ways. And part ultimately of the activities that can lead to violent threats are a way in which the Iranian regime has sought to at times legitimize itself and key actors here in the UK, and using the charitable system to do that. And then also has sought to spread its influence and radicalize young people, parts of the British Muslim community. That has been going on for many years, pretty much in plain sight. But a time when our government may be patting itself on the back that it has not joined this conflict, but it's quite clear that the Iranians see the UK as an implacable enemy and are striking it in covert ways. In that environment, it is all the more important to understand how it is that the state operates, and to focus our minds on what we can do in the UK, using all the levers that we have to be able to reduce that threat to British people.
So this report is not written in a vacuum, as you sort of laid out right there. There is a cultural and historical backdrop that I think is very interesting, that I want to spend a little time exploring before we delve into the actual report, because I think what you're touching on is an important component, but it's a component of a much larger issue that Western societies are dealing with. And knowing I was going to talk to you, I pulled a book off my shelf that was published by a British author in 2006 because I was curious to see what I was reading back then and perhaps what has changed or what predictions might have been made. And I came across this, which was written 20 years before the 2026 US defense strategy was written, in which it accused Europe of cultural erasure. And I found when I read this a prescient excerpt that I wanted to get your thoughts on. So the author writes the following: "The United States may provide the muscle to defend the free world against Islamic fascism, but Britain, the originator of the values that America defends, provides the backbone. But what if things in Britain are not as they seem to America? What if Mr. Blair is an aberration within his own country? What if Britain, rather than being the front line of defense against the threat of radical Islam, has become a quisling state that eventually threatens to undermine that defense? What if instead of holding the line for Western culture against the Islamic jihad, Britain is sleepwalking into the arms of the enemy?" And the reason why I asked, again, I found it startling that that was written 20 years ago, and it was just echoed again in the beginning of 2026, But when I think of civilizational erasure or cultural suicide, it seems to the cultural erasure of Jews seems to predate what ultimately happens to a culture. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that as you sit right there in sort of the tumult of the storm.
Sure. I mean, I hope that that is a lurid and I hope exaggerated way of putting it, but clearly the threat is real in terms of those who seek to undermine our values from within, and the the Iranian state is one important part of that, but they are a strand of Islamist subversion within this country, which also extends strongly to Muslim Brotherhood influenced organizations. And yes, I think that there has been an adept strategy that has been played out over many years, as you say, decades now, um, of Islamist actors in different degrees of collusion or direction from hostile states, looking to use the West's very liberalism and freedoms against it, and it is a classic, long-established way of those who do not believe in liberal democracy first seeking legitimacy within liberal democratic estates and hollowing them out. I mean, you saw that in its in a really vivid way in Egypt at the time of the revolution, but I think in more subtle ways, the Islamist actors here tend not to be looking for a revolution overnight. This is a very long-term strategy, but they have been able to, I think, over a number of years now, um, turn parts of our debates to the West questioning itself and refusing to scrutinize highly regressive practices and beliefs that have been imported or implanted within our country. And yes, as you say, uh, this is felt first and foremost in an attack against Jewish people. And that is what you are seeing here in the UK. I was privileged to be part of a deeply moving and largely uplifting rally yesterday against anti-Semitism, which closed off Whitehall and was outside Downing Street, and it was a Jewish community and its allies saying, "No, we are not putting up with this." But a crucial part, I think, of understanding and why this is important is not simply that a society would rightly be judged by the way that it is able to protect Jewish people and other minorities, but also that this is an attack on what it means to be British and what it means to live in a tolerant democracy. And you are, we may be at an inflection point here. It is certainly a really important point in our development as a country, where these issues have come to the foreground more than they have been in the past. There is, I think, a responsibility and a challenge to the centre and the left of British politics to understand and acknowledge what is happening, and not to be cowed by or fall in step with the language of bad faith Islamist actors, which is to say that any attempt to lay out what I've just said is in itself Islamophobic. It is prejudiced, and therefore it shouldn't be taught. It shouldn't be mentioned, and those who mention it should be excluded from debates. And in fact, it is ordinary Muslims, uh, almost as much
Mhm.
as Jewish people who can feel the brunt of Islamist intimidation and violence. And it is not setting yourself against Islam to identify Islamism, be it practiced by Khomeini followers or other strands, as antithetical to Western liberal democracy.
And UK is not alone here. Australia just launched the highest level commission that on anti-Semitism that could be done in the judicial system there. I think being run by a former Supreme Court justice. We're seeing it in the United States as well. So this is plaguing all democracies that are vulnerable in this regard. You mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood, and so I want to start exploring the report because I found something curiously missing, I will say. When discussing Khomeinist ideology, you rightly, and I think astutely, I don't see this mentioned very often, explain that Khomeinist ideology is based off really the Muslim Brotherhood. Saeed Qutb, very well-known philosopher, prolific writer, thinker, and Muslim Brotherhood acolyte, Khomeini revered him and incorporated many of his thoughts into Shia Islam. That's why his version of Shia looks so similar to what we see in Sunni Islam. And the roadmap, when I'm reading this report, reads very, very similar to a Muslim Brotherhood roadmap, very similar type of orientation and strategy. But when you compared Khomeinist ideology, you compared it to ISIS, but not to the Muslim Brotherhood. And there's no discussion about the Muslim Brotherhood at all within the report. Was that purposeful? And if so, for what reason did you separate the two? What benefit is there for identifying just the IRGC and its strategy or Khomeini versus incorporating it as part of a larger Islamist problem?
It's a challenge, and I suppose I can only plead in my defence shortness of time. I suppose on one sense, and then in another, I wanted for this to keep the focus fairly narrow, and so to be able to, as I thought, and this is a tactical thing, and perhaps I didn't get the balance quite right, but the fact that Iranian influence is such a live topic at the moment, and it feels like there is there is a responsibility and an opportunity to be able to focus the political discourse on the centre on recognizing that the Iranian link is absolutely is malign, and therefore that action needs to be taken now. It is my ambition to broaden this out, not just on the charity sector, but on the wider influence of brotherhood-related groups. And I'm also the co-chair of a new organisation that I've founded within the British Parliament. So one of these all-party parliamentary groups, which there are many on a whole host of different subjects in the UK Parliament, and I founded one on defending democracy, which is going to have a lot of things that it could look at. But one of the key things that I want in the early focus is what is driving the intimidation, abuse, and harassment, and often violent threats to mainstream politicians at the moment. The Gaza campaigns have taken a really dark turn in this country since the 7th of October, and you've seen many parliamentarians threaten credible death threats, having to, of course, we're in a country where you've had two of our MPs assassinated by political extremists in the last 10 years, but you've got an explosion of political intimidation and violence that is clearly linked to the Gaza campaign, and that is not happening in a vacuum. There was an organised political push, and there are big questions that need to be followed over, uh, who is backing the so-called Muslim vote organisations that is adjacent to a lot of this. And so, yes, what I'm saying is fair challenge, but there is more to come on this.
And I think a simple way to say what you just said eloquently is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. This is a rather complex and large subject. I think expediently you chose to take something that was quite relevant and also very important and then expanding from there. So
Thank you.
fair enough, absolutely. So could you explain how and why the UK charitable system, or any charitable system in a democracy for that matter, because I think they're all being abused. We've seen that here in this country. Why are they so ripe for abuse?
Yeah, and digging into this, you get quite an alarming answer of vulnerabilities that need to be tackled urgently. Part of this is a problem that's common, I think, right across Western public discourse, and certainly in our civic institutions, is a fear of challenge, and a lack of confidence, and a fear that you, as I mentioned just before, in terms of the debate over so-called Islamophobia, that people who speak out and challenge can be branded as prejudice, and therefore it's easier just not to dig too far into organisations that you fear you don't fully understand, and you fear may immediately make that accusation against you. But then you look at the just the vulnerability of the system, which is the regulatory system for the charity sector, which is I started out making the case that this was a bloated. Now, actually, the charitable sector is enormous, but the regulatory system is designed to deal with bad individuals who are incompetent or corrupt and do not need to be identified and then removed from particular organizations. It is completely ill-equipped to deal with the idea of what is essentially a hostile state, using other organizations to promote its agenda and to gain foothold in public life. Because there is literally at the moment no power for anyone, for the Charity Commission, to strike out a charity. You cannot stop a charity being a charity once it is registered. You can only remove individual trustees and replace them with other trustees. And if you are if essentially your charity has been in the most notorious example, the Islamic Centre for England, set up with, until very recently, a direct constitutional link where one of its trustees was chosen by the Ayatollah. Then you take one trustee out, and another one is put in. So you need, as a first step, to urgently change the rules so that the charity system can actually be equipped to protect people, and to the recognition in government, which is there now on paper. They have moved during the process of this report, which is a good thing. But there's a lot of catching up that the system has got to do. That striking out extremism from the charity sector is an important role that needs to be understood. It needs to be empowered with the laws that I'm saying, and it also needs to be resourced.
So when you say there's no ability for the commission, charitable commission, to revoke the status of a charity, is there any power in the UK that can do that beyond the commission?
No. It's extraordinary.
Once,
It can't be done. You're a charity, and then that's you. I mean, you cannot be struck off. It's absurd. It's a huge, it is a huge loophole which is being exploited by many of these organisations. And there is my report found a range of activity from um, the, as I say, the Islamic Centre of England, which has got those historical and clearly so deeply grounded links of to the regime, um, to individuals whose pattern of movement and behaviour and statements showed close proximity to the IRGC, right the way through to organisations where um, you can't necessarily see a direct link to the IRGC, but they are openly promoting the allegiance to the Ayatollah Khomeini or Khomeini and his teachings. And this, as you pointed out in your introduction, it is a long standing issue in the UK. It is instructive that Salman Rushdie, the author, when he wrote
Satanic Verses.
Satanic Verses in the 1980s, he had to go into hiding because there was a presence of the Iranian regime there in the UK, and some of these organisations were set up in the 80s, in the early days after the Iranian Revolution, and so now they function as established entities themselves, and they don't necessarily have to have that direct line of contact into the regime in Tehran because they've been set up for decades and they know exactly what they're doing. But their presence is that their presence is malign, and there needs to be stronger powers to be able to deal with them.
Well, you answered a number of the questions that I think I was having when I read the report, because I remember thinking a report and actually wrote a note here. From what I can tell, no charity has been shut down. So not only is the commission not stopping this abuse, it's according to a sort of an excerpt that they said, which is, we are not aware of any individual involved in a charity or charity itself being prosecuted or convicted in the UK in relation to Iran-linked charity. They're not even acknowledging that this is happening. It's stupefying to me that.
Yeah, I started out this this report just, I mean, utterly incredulous as to what the commission was doing. I was actually towards the end of once the report was published, was in a way pleasantly surprised that I think they, at leadership level within the commission, I think there is absolutely an understanding that this is a significant problem, and as it happens, some of the leadership of the commission has got a grounding in counterterrorism in the past, but they are. I think there is some truth in what they say, and that they are hamstrung at the moment. That the legal toolkit that they have is derisory, and I mean also the level of dedicated funding which they are given by the government is a tiny proportion of it is directed towards this activity, and I think there has not been an understanding at political level until now that this is, and that is still growing. This is still a work in process in being able to get that political focus that this is a real problem. It's not simply a case of paranoia, people inventing reds under the bed. It is part of a systematic attempt to and a systematic influence operation to undermine the country.
After 30 years of reports and books and anecdotal evidence and assassinations and everything else that we've seen,
Yeah.
it is incredulous to think that there's still no understanding of what the threat really is.
Mm.
Let's add some, let's say, flesh to the bones here. You write about in the report, you talk about the Islamic Center of England, and you talk about the Urshad Trust and the kind of the web of organizations that obfuscate what's going on.
Mm.
Could you lay out kind of how these organizations or how the directors work, what the web of connections are?
Yes, and uh, I think overlaying all of this, you have got an allegiance to the Iranian regime, which uh, it ought to be it needs to be in of itself seen as antithetical to charitable purposes, and bringing that understanding. You like to mention the shared trust. There is the Dar al Hekmah Trust, also the Abrar Islamic Foundation, where there are there are organizational links between a number of these charities. Some of them have had individuals that have moved from one to the other. When you go and look at the like some of of the patterns where some of the individuals have been recorded as being in Iran in the past. There is a level of there's a level of proximity, but you can you can deduce the overall purpose of this as something of an interconnected web simply by the uh, the clear allegiance that they have to the Iranian state and to the Ayatollah, which it is it, I mean it is ought to be a massive red flag um, for any charitable regime to be promoting such a deeply malign regime, particularly at this time when we are in a well, they are threatening British interests. They've attacked British bases, and the as we know, the IRGC has carried out a number of assaults. It's scores of attempts thwarted by our intelligence agencies, and and it was I mean, it was really it was extraordinary. Uh, One individual who had formerly been a senior member of the Iranian regime before becoming a dissident uh, described essentially the Islamic Centre of England as the nerve centre of the IRGC in the UK, which is incredible, and it shows that this is not just um, this is not just about a, a, a slightly conservative um, culture being pushed, and troubling that though that may be. It provides a bed of organisation in which the IRGC can operate, and we have um, this parallel debate, which is also deeply frustratingly slow, about when we are going to ban the fully prescribe the IRGC as a terrorist organisation.
I was just going to mention that it makes it a little difficult to ban the IRGC within your own country and its workings if you haven't prescribed it fully as a terrorist organization.
Yeah, and it would make it much easier to be able to shut down much of this activity if the IRGC were fully prescribed, because at the moment you are having to prove wrongdoing through other standards of proof, which is you can have high levels of probability, but not always the smoking gun right in front of you. Whereas you prescribe the IRGC, and then any links with that organisation, any support for it, until it becomes a criminal offence in of itself. And we have pushed and pushed, and will continue to do that. It is right at the top of the demands of the of Jewish community organisations, beseeching the government to act on its word, to do whatever they will say. We will do whatever it takes to keep Jewish people safe. And then people say, okay, well, do this and do that and do that, and they haven't at the moment followed through. But they know the level of pressure on them now to act on the IRGC, and what I think has stopped this move, which actually all we kind of speculate sometimes as to what are the reasons, why on earth has it not been done so far. But I think ultimately, most probably, this comes down to a deeply embedded view within the Foreign Office that the Iranians are part of this ancient civilization, that we need to have lines in, they are valuable to us and non-proliferation. Therefore, we don't want to completely cast them out. We don't want to annoy them at any time, and therefore don't go this full step. But that view has always been wrong, and now it is just so deeply exposed by what is happening here.
So after reading this, the report, I left saying, where are two critical aspects, I think, of UK politics and policy? That is, where is MI5 in this internal intelligence, given the deep connections between Khamenei and many of the people now serving in leadership roles in the UK? And where are the journalists? Where's the media? I think there was a reference in here that not enough people may know about this, but that would be the role of the media. So what's your response to that?
To deal with them in the reverse order, getting this out into the public domain is always a challenge. I spent a lot of my life in adjacent communications. I was Gordon Brown's business spokesman in Downing Street for a while. There's been an uptick in the level of attention. There is a greater. This is not quite the niche issue that it once would have been, and the Iranian-inspired attack or either inspired or directed attacks are pushing this up the news agenda more than it was. But you're right that we are not fully there yet, and we have to. Part of me getting this report out was to help grow the base of understanding within mainstream politics and within the media to do that. And what you do as ELNET plays an important role in this. And thank you for the way that you focus on Iran and spread the word. And then MI5 and the intelligence services. I think they are absolutely alive to the scale of this threat and work very hard. And as I say, they will publicly say that they've thwarted more than 30 IRGC plots in the UK in recent years. I think there is. Probably two things that happen. I think there's probably been too much isolation between a security conversation, which it's been easier to. There's a common understanding amongst the in security circles that the biggest threat facing the terrorist extremist threat facing this country is Islamist extremism, but that understanding has not properly been permeated into political circles. That certainly on the centre and on the left have been much more comfortable in talking about the far right, for example, and I think systematically downplaying the threat of Islamists extremism. So that is, I think the disjunct is part of it, but then the other part, which is really important to understand, is that uh, the intelligence services are limited in their resource, and they were taken off the beat largely of extremism and subversion uh, after 9/11 in 2001, and were put on more explicitly on a CT on countering terrorism, and that has left. It's absolutely understandable why they did that, but it has left a gap. And my previous report to the one published this year was a report for the Prime Minister, then Prime Minister and Home Secretary, on political violence and the looking at the far right and also the far left, and its links with Islamist actors, the sort of red-green alliance which you alluded to, and I concluded in that there's a gap in the system with the kind of understanding that was there during the Cold War has been consciously allowed to wither away. And when you talk to the services about that, they say, "Yeah, okay, fair point, but what do you want us to stop doing, or where are you going to find the extra resource to do it?" And I think that is a valid challenge. We have to be serious as a country about the harm that's being done to our democracy by this threat level, which largely is below the terrorist level, but nevertheless can provide the conducive, permissive atmosphere for terrorism. One, and two, is part of a wider erosion of our country, which we should care about.
The Muslim Brotherhood, I believe, the strategy was to infiltrate, to inculcate, and to dominate. And once you infiltrate, that's where you start to indoctrinate, and that is what is in fact taking place all across democracies: infiltrating, indoctrinating, and then ultimately dominating with a very virulent idea of the way the world should be run. And again, UK is not alone here. We're dealing with the very same issues in this country as is France, Germany, Canada, Australia. We are all in this together. We have a few questions here. I want to remind everybody to submit your questions, and I'll start asking them in just a moment. I want to finish my line of questioning. Lord Walney, you came up with 7 prescriptions that you think the UK should take. What are the 3 most important ones that you think the UK should adopt that would have, let's say, the most effective change and most immediate change, perhaps, on what we're seeing?
One, ban the IRGC. It's essential to everything, and it goes. It needs, as for the reasons we discussed, needs to be done anyway. But it actually helps with the charitable system as well. Secondly, we have got to we've got to fast track the power to be able to strike out directors, to strike out for charities, not simply suspend charity holders. And so, if I can be, if you indulge me, there are a number of the recommendations that fall in that bracket, and so I'm going to only formally take 2, but it's an umbrella for some of the others. In that, I think if there was political leadership now, not simply to say, okay, well, you know the way that politicians' minds often work, and I've been guilty of this and the centre. You make the announcement, you press release it, you say something about it in Parliament, and you think job done. Whereas actually, all we have at the moment is a commitment for the Charity Commission to be given new powers, and that is not being politically driven from the centre. There's not cabinet ministers, or to an extent number 10 actually, are leading the pack on this, but there is not a sort of there is no cabinet minister that's gripping this and saying, okay, leaders of the charity mission, you've got to do this fast. What do you need to do it? This is what we're thinking with this legislation, and that has got to be driven through the system, because there's a system change that is needed to be able for the UK to become more resilient against this threat. But it starts with political leadership to push through the changes that, on the face of it, have been announced.
Okay. Well, let's go to some of the questions. First one is from John Mirish, and he brings up Popper's paradox of tolerance, which basically says unlimited tolerance will lead to the disappearance of tolerance. Has the UK gone a step too far here, and can it pull it back from the brink? And how does it deal with extreme radicalization that's taking place?
Yeah, I think we unquestionably we have gone too far, and can we pull it back? Well, let's see. I mean, what I often say to my friends in the centre and the left, I was a member of the Labour Party, served in the last Labour government for as an advisor for a number of years, and I'm not sure whether my friends would now would now count me as on the left or not. But what I often say to my friends in the centre and the left is that you have got to own this, because if you don't do this, then the right and potentially the far right will do it in a way that you are not comfortable. Well, you're not comfortable with any of this, and I understand that, but we'll do it in a way which actually damages some of the things that is really good and one of our strengths as a country. And look, there'll be a vibrant debate amongst probably the two of us and everyone, and it's all about why precisely that those lines ought to fall. But I think change is coming to this country, and you just looked at the way in which the Reform Party has led in the opinion polls for well over a year now, and part of that is a large part of that is driven by economic discontent, and when you're not happy about your economic future, then lots of other things that you're not happy about in the country feel sharper. But there is a really important strand in its own right in Brit saying to us, we have been telling you this for decades, and you have ignored us, and you've gone off and done all of this multicultural stuff, and you've closed your ears to close your eyes to the threat, and we've just had enough. So it probably will. Things are going to change, and they're either going to go in a way which is ugly and may cause a significant amount of damage, or my hope is that actually the centre wakes up to this as a problem and starts talking about it far more openly and being more robust and intolerant of intolerance, and laying out the rails of where what it means to live in a liberal society, and what we are, and where if you come here, you have to. There is no negotiation over some of these values. You live in this country, and you follow, and you have to follow those rules. And if you don't, we will challenge you in a way that we have not done in recent years.
Yeah, what you're saying I came across this very obscure 7-part essay called The Crescent, Crown, and Pitchfork. I don't know if you had ever read it, but it paints a somewhat precarious situation for the UK if things continue down this path. And I often say this to people, well, it has to go down one of two paths. Either it becomes the frog in the boiling water, and England just becomes or the UK becomes what it will become, or you're going to have the opposite and equal reaction come, which you just alluded to, that could get quite ugly. And I think that's what we're watching play out slowly and over time.
Yeah. there is a big disconnect between voters who feel that they've been taken for granted by the mainstream parties, and so I don't think I don't think the country is sleepwalking into this. It's possible that our mainstream political leadership continues to drift into a place where they just get completely annihilated, really, in the polls. And as I say, I don't think cultural issues are not the sole driver of this. Economic stagnation and frustration is a key part of it, but the two have become enmeshed together in many people's minds.
Let's turn back to these questions. I think you might have alluded to this, but Gerard Beanstalk asked, can the Charity Commission freeze assets can they just freeze assets of a charity that's questionable? It doesn't seem like they have the authority to do that.
No, they don't. I mean, you could, if things were sufficiently serious in levels of criminality, then then serious to the National Crime Agency could come in, and you could use other criminal frameworks to freeze assets, but that isn't happening at the moment, and a lot of this is operating like underneath the level at which that would be triggered. Nevertheless, there is the charities are doing deeply malign activity and are not being held accountable to it. So yes, it's an interesting point as to whether and how that that power can be more effectively given in a more robust system, which is actually geared up to tackle extremism. It's a good question. Thank you.
And I assume that will be part of one of your recommendations to strengthen the Commission's ability to address, these types of charities.
Yeah, I want the debate to focus now on precisely what is the legislation. It's got to go. It's got to be split up, but we need to kickstart that conversation about what exactly would be workable and how quickly can these new powers be brought forward, because there is going to need to be legislation. The cost of charity framework, charity law framework is so inept. You can't do this by secondary legislation on the quiet. We're going to, I think, have to have a bill that actually changes the law, and so and that can drive the conversation about what are the powers that will be most effective. But you've got to have, as I say, you've got to have the leadership from government that recognises it is a problem and are going to push it forwards.
I think you just answered Harold Eisenman's question, which was about where is Parliament here and can't they pass legislation? The question is yes, but do they have the leadership and courage to do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always very difficult for something that's as big and as complex as that to be driven by the Parliament itself. There is a system of private members' bills, but they rarely tackle something which is as wide as this. They can help put the focus on the issue, and debates that you can have in Parliament can expose the need for this. And I think we definitely want to see more of this. But ultimately, this has got to be a government process. And so we've got the King's Speech tomorrow, which will set out the legislative platform. I am expecting a crime counter-extremism bill in that. There may well be a line in it to say, and in this we will put the new powers for extremism. But as I say, that is still governing by press release. You've still got to actually get the timetable done, and you've got to focus the minds of what it actually is going to be. And I don't think, talking to everyone behind the scenes, what work has not yet been done.
Well, we still have a number of questions in the queue, but based on time, I'm going to turn the last question over to our Chair Emeritus, Larry Hochberg, and then we will turn it over to Tom Flesch, our Chair, for closing remarks. Lord Walney, though, I do want to say thank you very much. This is a really very cool conversation, and I appreciated having you on to discuss these issues. Larry.
Same, Martin. Thanks a lot.
it certainly is interesting. I wonder if the group on the phone knows that ELNET in Rome about 10 days ago instituted the first conference regarding the Muslim Brotherhood and its dangerous aspects to democracy. It was quite successful, very well attended, and you may want to send more about that. I don't know, Mark, as it goes on. But the real question is the U.S. branded the IRGC as terrorist yet? Have we done it? What we want England to do it? And secondly, what exactly does the Lord recommend that ELNET UK do to push this issue along in the Commons?
Thank you. On the question of what's the US done, well, yes, I mean, the IRGC is fully prescribed in the US. It's prescribed across much of Europe, and so the big leap for the UK not having done this, which is that this current government is maintaining that you couldn't really fully designate as a terrorist organization a state entity, does not hold water because others have done it. And even if you're prepared to say, okay, well, go with that, they have promised a new legislation which basically enables you to have a form of prescription for an organization that is part of a state's arm, and they promised to do that. But again, where is it? You know, that this crisis is happening right now in front of it. The IRGC is planning operations. We could fast track this through Parliament now and get on with it. And so that is what we've got to do. And in terms of ELNET UK, look, you guys are doing a brilliant job, and Joan Ryan is an old friend and former comrade in the Labour benches in the House of Commons with me. You are have been clear-sighted and clearly spoken on the threat of Iran for a number of years now, and your leadership through that time has been enormously valuable. And I hope that we can work together to step this up, because all of this happens within a context of people understanding what the threat is and understanding that Iran's links to, as you say, to the Muslim Brotherhood and hostile states operating in this territory. And this is not simply code for people finding different ways to say they don't like Muslims. It's not that at all. And you haven't been frightened off this topic for a number of years, and we've appreciated your leadership, and we need more of it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you. Now, Tom, the floor is yours. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. My goodness, this has really been a very, very, very interesting conversation, causing a lot of thought, leaving us with a lot to think about when we hang up. But my recollection, and correct me now or at some other time, that it's very difficult for the private sector, especially, to bring actions against these types of charitable organizations, provided that they have the necessary level of facts to bring an action without the fear of defamation lawsuits in response to these private actions. And I don't know if the laws in the UK actually serve as a disincentive or a fear of the difficulty in prosecuting these kind of lawsuits by the private sector. And case in point, Deborah Lipstadt against David Irving, the Holocaust survivor, and it was a very expensive ordeal and very, very difficult in the end. In this case, she prevailed. But I'm just wondering whether or not the laws in the UK make it very difficult for the private sector to come out and bring actions against these types of charitable organizations that really are covered for Muslim Brotherhood or any kind of organizations that have an anti effect. But I want to thank Mark. You did a great job today. It was so nice, Lord Walney. You're amazing. Your report is fascinating, and I hope that more and more people will read it, and it will cause a lot of changes, or at least exposures into really what is going on. So to all our viewers who tuned in today, and we had a lot of them today, thank you for tuning in. I hope you were as moved by I was by the information. And we thank you very, very, very much for tuning in, and we look forward for you to tune in next week's and our next following weeks. And in the end, I have to say to all our viewers and all our supporters, these things are not possible without your support. So thank you very much for being with us so long.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Walney. It was a pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We'll see you next week. Same time, same channel, as the saying goes. Have a good day, everybody.